One thing I both loved and hated inside of Fallout 4 was the weapon modding system. I loved it because it allowed you to customise your weapons, which is great. And I hated it because you basically were just scrolling to the bottom of the list of mods and choosing an objectively best option rather than making real choices. It was a good first step in terms of item modding, but there's a lot of room for improvement. We already know Starfield has weapon modding, and it already looks promising, with the tiny snippet we've been shown having some options with potential pros and cons. Here we see that the drum magazine gives more ammo before a reload, but explosive rounds increase the damage significantly. Seems like a fairly easy choice, but there's also white hot rounds listed at the bottom, which may prove to be more useful against certain enemies, where explosive could just be good generalist damage. Unfortunately, we've not really been given much of a look at the weapon modding system though, so it's mostly just speculation as to how much of an improvement it will be over Fallout 4's version. And so, I decided to take a closer look at Fallout's weapon modding system to see what worked well, what could be improved, and what was missed. I'm going to start off with what I consider to be the biggest problem with Fallout 4's system. When you are crafting the receiver of your weapon, you just go with the highest damage at 99% of the time. While there were some interesting choices, such as a range of ammo types for a few weapons, and the choice of going automatic or semi-auto, generally speaking, you'd just scroll to the bottom of the list and pick the highest damage option you could make. This led to the majority of mods just being pointless. Why go for bonus critical damage when you can just go for significantly higher base damage? Reduced weight may be nice, but it's not worth the trade-off of making your weapon worse overall. What I want to see for Starfield are proper choices for us to make. I don't just want to focus on highest base damage and have everything else be irrelevant. Personally, I'd love to see every mod come with some kind of a trade-off, so depending on the type of build you're playing, different mods will be helpful. Take the Tombstone here. It's a rifle, seems still fairly low physical damage, but has high fire rate and reasonable accuracy. Maybe you can get a heavy barrel kind of modification, which increases damage significantly, but at the cost of making the weapon way more, drastically reducing the fire rate, and making the range a little shorter too. That way it becomes less of a rapid fire multi-purpose weapon, but more specialised as a mid-range marksman rifle. Or maybe there could be a mod which reduces the damage, but pushes accuracy above 90% and gives a little boost to range. That way you've got a weapon that's reliable for taking down smaller threats from most distances, but which wouldn't be that useful if fighting something strong. The key here is to make it so that the mods present a choice to the player. It shouldn't be the simple decision of just picking whatever the highest damage number is every time. There was some sort of attempt made with this back in the days of Fallout 4, with armor-piercing receivers being a thing. Problem is, they sucked. They just flat out didn't perform better than higher damage mods. The trade-off of losing damage to gain armor penetration didn't balance out at all. But in theory, it could work. In fact, it has worked before. Take a look at Fallout New Vegas with its different ammo types. When fighting against lightly armoured enemies, such as wild animals, you could use hollow point rounds to do extra damage. But if you tried to use that same ammo type against a guy in power armour, then you'd deal less damage than just regular ammo. For the boost, you need to switch to AP rounds instead. It was a really elegant little system, and this kind of thinking is exactly what I want to see with Starfield. We do already have some promise that this is to come, with the few seconds worth of weapon modding we have got to see showcasing a choice of magazines. The weapon initially has a drum mag installed, but we see that there's also a choice of armor-piercing rounds, explosive rounds, and white-hot rounds. Armor-piercing takes it from 8 damage to 8.8 damage, and has the description, "More powerful casing can penetrate even the sturdiest armours," while the explosive rounds mod pushes that damage up to 14.8, and we then get to see that this truly does make the rounds explode when they hit the target, dealing some extra damage. While this could just be the same bigger number is better problem, there's a chance that Bethesda have learned, and the explosive damage will be more generalist, and the armor piercing is better against protected enemies. This may seem pretty similar to Fallout 4's receivers at first, so you could be doubting there's any improvement here. But keep in mind, this is just for the weapon's magazine, the place where the ammo is stored. Previously this only really affected ammo capacity and reload speed, whereas now there's also a damage factor to consider. We also see that there's slots for receiver, internal, optic, and muzzle, plus a couple we don't get to see. Fingers crossed each of these has also seen improvements since the Fallout days, and we get actual choices to make, rather than just scrolling down to the bottom and looking for the highest number every time. One thing I did kind of like in Fallout 4's system was that you essentially had tiers of mods. Sure, you want to go for the advanced receiver right away on your 10mm pistol, but you need to rank up the gun nut perk first. And so you'd start off with the hardened receiver, and then work your way up, improving the weapon as you leveled. This didn't work perfectly, but I don't think the general idea was bad, and I already prefer the look of what Starfield is doing with this. It seems like you have to complete research in order to install better mods on your weapons. You go into the research lab to see that you've completed the project Barrel Mods 1, and unlocked Barrel Mods 2 as a research project. We don't get a real good look at this, but what we do see is that this research requires collecting specific materials, and the fact there's a percentage shown up top, and this part on the direct was shown at the end of the outpost section, makes me think that it'll likely be a case of needing to set up a dedicated research outpost and gather or deposit the materials there over time in order to get the mods unlocked. I could see this working out better than just a standard level-based system, as you could focus your character around research-specific skills, travel around to gather materials, and hire the best people to work at your outpost while still a low level, taking on specific tasks that logically make sense at getting better modifications, rather than just killing a bunch of enemies and then suddenly knowing how to craft a superior upgrade. There is something else I'd like to see added to this system though, and that is the plans mechanic inside of Fallout 76. I didn't like that in Fallout 4, you could instantly see every upgrade and recipe known to man. This was especially bad with the launch of Far Harbor, where players found the names of all the enemies before ever setting foot on the island, simply because they chose to cook up some rad roaches, and saw all the new recipes there straight away. What Fallout 76 did was give everyone a base level of known recipes, mods and so on, and then made it so that you had to find the rest. While there were technically a few ways to do this, the one I like the most is the plan system, where schematics were given as rewards or just laid out in the wasteland for you to find. This is such a better system than just innately knowing everything and waiting around for the right perk or research to then be able to make it. Why? Well, it allows for some really cool surprises for starters. Let's say that, late game in Starfield, you discover some alien technology, and maybe there's knives coated in a strange alien goop that makes them pass straight through any resistances. When you discover this, you get to add that mod to your own knives for the same effect. That's a brilliant discovery to make, and one thing that would completely undercut it is if the alien goop modification was shown to you immediately when you first tried to upgrade your starting knife at level 1. On top of stopping in-game spoilers, it also provides an additional reward system for completing missions. Let's say that you help a group of scientists get back their research lab that had been overrun by dangerous wildlife. It might not always make sense for these scientists to be able to give you weapons or a ton of cash as your reward. If they had those, then they probably could have fought off the creatures themselves or hired a mercenary group. But instead, a lone adventurer stumbled across them, and, to show gratitude, they teach you what knowledge they possess, as they have nothing of value they can really part with. As your mission reward, you get a bunch of useful plans that will teach you to make significant improvements to your weapons, armour, maybe even spaceships. Not only is it a more thematic reward to receive, but it can also lead to certain quests being desirable to complete. You'll want to head to planet Floofy Floof in the Glub Glub system, because that's where the Skull Piercer ammo plan is found, and that will give you bonus headshot damage on your sniper rifles. And in general terms, exploration. It's just another thing to keep an eye out for and get excited by. On top of all the generic loot you see all over the place, there would be knowledge to pick up as well, something which could improve your character. I already talked about collectibles in a previous Starfield video, and these would work in a similar way, providing you a real bonus and another reason to go out on an adventure. Alright, so far I've kind of dunked on Fallout 4's weapon modification system a bit, but it does do some things really well. One of which is visual changes to the weapon. If you put a drum magazine on your rifle, it doesn't just get a higher ammo capacity on the back end. You see that the rifle has a big old container at the bottom to store all those bullets. And when you put a suppressor on your weapon, it sticks out the front in a real obvious way. Not only is this just nice from an aesthetic standpoint, but it can be really useful in combat or when sorting through loot. You see a space pirate with a drum magazine based rifle, and you know it will be a while before they reload. A Crimson Fleet member has a basic unmodded pistol, chances are they're not very high up in the pecking order. Just shot up a room full of enemies and not certain which weapons to pick up? Just grab all the ones which look modded to hell and leave any base variants behind. It's a real useful detail for the game to have, and we already see some of it in Starfield. Whether or not it has expanded since Fallout 4, we don't really know. Not every mod in that game changed the appearance, so you wouldn't know what kind of a receiver a weapon had, for example. While this wasn't a disaster, it would be cool to have small little visual details change on every mod. What I suspect may be the case as well is a purely visual mod slot. We already have seen that there's an Old Mars skin pack as the pre-order bonus for the game, and that heavily indicates there will be other skins you can put on your equipment. While this does bring the fear of dreaded microtransactions with skin packs and the like, I'd much rather that than anything which gives an actual advantage in-game. Sure, I'd much rather have all the skins in-game as standard, but we'll have to see. Fingers crossed though, we do at least get a really good range of skins in the game from launch, so that we can go make sure our weapons can match any look we want to go for. To wrap up, I'm going to go over a couple of things that Fallout 4 basically missed out on, but which I would expect to see in Starfield. Crafting weapons from scratch, and being able to buy mods rather than craft them. Both of these things technically did exist in Fallout 4, but in incredibly minor ways that just weren't beneficial to the player. What I want is the choice to play the game purely with equipment that I've made myself, or by never doing any crafting and just buying or looting everything I need. Both should be viable options. Looking at the research lab once again, we do see an equipment section which has me hopeful that you'll be able to craft weapons from raw materials. After all, we can do it inside of 76. I wouldn't want it to be as simple as it is in Fallout though. The Wasteland is a place where you would scavenge things together and hope that duct tape is good enough to keep a barrel attached to a stock. But in a sci-fi game, I'd like to see it a little less makeshift, and maybe requiring extra work, some perk investment for anything besides the basics, and maybe even some NPCs to help you with the task. As for buying the weapon parts, you should just be able to buy them. If you're someone who doesn't like the crafting system, first off, well done for making it this far for a video based entirely around that, but secondly and more importantly, you shouldn't be forced to interact with it in order to make your weapons worth using. There always should be an alternative path to take, and purchasing the mods direct should be a way to do that. Just head to the nearest gunsmith, purchase the mods you want, easily attach them at a bench, and you're done. No messing around with gathering materials or spending hours researching, you just did the money shortcut. Sure, it would mean less money for other activities, but that's the trade-off. Time spent to make it yourself, or money spent to buy it quicker. If both of these are viable choices in Starfield, then I'll be happy. And there we have it. A video all about my hopes and concerns for the weapon modding system to come. Fingers crossed it will be a stark improvement from what we've seen before, but with how little we've seen over it, I'm not all that confident. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, make sure to subscribe for more Starfield content, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.